The FIA changed rules after an intense driver meeting was held. Carlos stuns rivals with an outstanding pole position, and Franco says he's ready to be F1. Do consider subscribing to the channel. Now let's get straight into the latest F1 news. Carlos Sainz scorched a pole for the Mexico Grand Prix with a 0.225-second advantage over Formula One championship leader Max Verstappen. Sainz was in imperious form throughout the session and found 2 times good enough for pole, opening his Q3 run with a 1mil 16.055s and improving on his final run to a 1mil 15.946 to line up at the front of Sunday's grid. Verstappen rescued a front-row start after losing his first Q3 lap to track limits, having cut both parts of the Turn 2-3 chicane, and set a 1mil 16.171s on his final attempt to qualify ahead of championship rival Lando Norris. Norris's first lap was comparatively poor and was only 5th at the end of the opening runs, but found improvement on his final tour to head the second row alongside Charles Leclerc. The Monegasque saved a snap through the high-speed corners and managed to collect 4th, albeit 0.3 down on his teammate. The 2 Mercedes drivers occupied the third row, as George Russell outqualified Lewis Hamilton as the younger Briton improved more on the final tour. They were ahead of an impressive Kevin Magnussen, who parked his car 7th on the grid over Pierre Gasly. Alex Albon and Nico Hülkenberg were 9th and 10th, the German having overcooked it on the exit of turn 12 on his last lap to lose a chance at moving further up the grid. Yuki Tsunoda was the master of his own Q2 elimination after putting his RB in the wall ahead of the Foro Sol section while on a flying lap, causing a red flag with a crash at turn 12. This also denied his teammate Liam Lawson the chance to progress, as the two looked set to improve and challenge Gasly's 10th fastest lap. Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll were both starting their final flying laps before the session was stopped and were subsequently eliminated, while Valtteri Bottas was also denied the chance to break out of Q2 in the wake of the incident. Oscar Piastri and Sergio Perez were the big scalps taken in Q1. The Australian failed to reclaim his FP3 topping form and also failed to progress into the second phase of qualifying, making his life more difficult by losing a lap for track limits. He reckoned that, had he not gone beyond the turn 12 curb and lost a second in the process, he would have made it through. Perez was dumped out at the first hurdle of qualifying for his home Grand Prix, having struggled with braking in the low-speed corners throughout the session. The Mexican only got up to 15th on his final lap of the opening stage, but was shuffled down the order by Charles Leclerc's escape from the drop zone. Esteban Ocon and Zhou Guanyu propped up the order, as Ocon's late effort to overturn the on-the-cusp Lance Stroll crumbled in the final sector. The FIA, which is the governing body for Formula One, has reportedly come to an agreement with the drivers regarding changes to the rules surrounding wheel-to-wheel racing. This development comes in the wake of several heated exchanges between 2 prominent title contenders, Max Verstappen and Lando Norris, during the recent race held in Austin, Texas. According to a report from the BBC, their on-track battles sparked significant discussions among both drivers and teams after they competed closely for position. In Austin, Norris started the race from the pole position, with Verstappen right beside him on the front row. As the race began, Verstappen tried to gain an advantage by diving to the inside of turn 1. However, in doing so, both drivers inadvertently went wide, which allowed Charles Leclerc, who ultimately won the race, to take advantage of the situation and move into the lead. This sequence of events highlighted the thin line between aggressive racing and potential rule violations. As the Grand Prix progressed toward its conclusion, Verstappen and Norris found themselves dueling once again. During a crucial moment at turn 12, Norris attempted to overtake Verstappen by going around the outside. Unfortunately, neither driver successfully navigated the corner, leading to Norris rejoining ahead of Verstappen after leaving the track. This decision brought about a 5-second time penalty for Norris, penalizing him for gaining an advantage by leaving the track. The recent controversies surrounding these incidents made the rules of engagement a hot topic of discussion among the drivers at the Mexican Grand Prix this past weekend. As reported by the BBC, the conversation during the drivers' briefing led to the FIA agreeing to modify the existing regulations that govern situations like those involving Verstappen and Norris. Many drivers expressed their belief that Verstappen had taken advantage of a loophole in the current rules while defending his position during the race. It is expected that the FIA will present the revised wording of these regulations to the drivers for their approval before the conclusion of the 2024 Formula One season. A spokesperson for the FIA commented that there is a shared understanding and commitment to continually update the driving standards guidelines. This commitment acknowledges that the drivers have requested these guidelines to be continually adjusted and that such changes have always been made following discussions with the Grand Prix Drivers Association. The spokesperson emphasized that the rules should evolve over time and that this evolution should not solely be a reaction to isolated incidents like the one in Austin. Instead, it should be driven by a broader desire to ensure consistency in the decisions made by the race stewards. Lewis Hamilton, who was a rival to Verstappen in the 2021 title race, was notably outspoken about the need for changes to the guidelines when he addressed the media in Mexico. When asked about the gray area that had been revealed in the F1 driving guidelines due to the recent battle between Verstappen and Norris, Hamilton responded by stating that such ambiguities have always existed. He remarked that these gray areas have allowed certain drivers to get away with aggressive tactics for an extended period. Hamilton firmly believes that adjustments to the rules are necessary. In his comments, Hamilton pointed out the inconsistencies that often arise from weekend to weekend, largely depending on which stewards are officiating. He stressed the need for the sport to improve across various areas, highlighting that in other major global sports, officiating is handled by full-time referees, a practice he suggested could benefit Formula One as well. Hamilton expressed his concern about drivers being able to make aggressive maneuvers, stating that it should not be acceptable for any driver to simply drive aggressively into a corner at the expense of others and still come out ahead. After the race, McLaren, the team that Norris drives for, lodged a protest against the 5-second penalty that had been handed down to him. Unfortunately for them, their request for a review was denied by the FIA. The governing body explained their reasoning for the rejection, stating that a mistake in an FIA document does not constitute new evidence. McLaren had argued that Norris was no longer the defending driver in that moment, but had instead become the attacker after briefly getting ahead of Verstappen as they approached turn 12. As it stands, Verstappen continues to lead in the Drivers' Championship standings with a significant margin, holding a 57-point advantage over Norris. Demanding greater openness and clarity in the Horner investigation, especially considering that the team principal was looked into by Red Bull's parent company for claims of inappropriate behavior, which ultimately led to the charges being dismissed, McLaren's CEO Zak Brown did not hold back in his criticism. He described the current atmosphere at Red Bull as a pretty toxic environment right now. Furthermore, he recently mentioned that there is a lot of poison present within the team. Brown pointed out that Adrian Newey's departure marked the first domino to fall in what he views as a team that has been significantly shaken and destabilized. In his ongoing scrutiny of Red Bull, he called out the issues surrounding their breach of the budget cap for the year 2021, expressing frustration with what he sees as nothing more than excuses from Red Bull, rather than an acceptance of responsibility for their actions. His latest grievance concerns the ride height trick associated with the RB20, which has drawn considerable attention. In this instance, Brown has demanded that the higher-ups at Red Bull sign an affidavit stating that the ride height trick was never employed under parc fermé conditions. He even indicated that suspension could be a possible consequence for Red Bull if they are found guilty of any wrongdoing. It is clear that Brown, who has raised objections about Red Bull operating with two teams under the names of Red Bull Racing and VCARB, does not have a favorable view of their current operating methods. Red Bull, for their part, has not remained silent on this matter. Team principal Christian Horner has taken some digs at McLaren, particularly related to their mini DRS rear wing design. Earlier in the season, they reportedly notified the FIA about a hole found in McLaren's brake drum. The fact that their drivers are currently competing closely for race victories and the World Championship title, often colliding on the track, has only added to the tension between the two teams. However, it should not be characterized as a comprehensive war of words, according to Horner, who claims Red Bull has hardly made any comments regarding McLaren at all. When asked if there is some sort of vendetta that McLaren has against Red Bull, Horner responded to media outlets, including PlanetF1.com, by saying, "First of all, regarding this supposed war of words, I find it amusing because I don't believe we have been excessively vocal about McLaren." He went on to explain that when a team is consistently performing at the top levels of the competition, it naturally draws more attention and scrutiny from others. He added, I can feel that McLaren, particularly, has been very outspoken about different aspects related to our team, our car, and the stewards, among various other matters. The ongoing disagreements between McLaren and Red Bull have only intensified with the situation surrounding the United States Grand Prix, during which Lando Norris and Max Verstappen clashed on the track. Norris received a 5-second penalty for overtaking Verstappen after being pushed off the track, with many arguing that the fault lay with Verstappen, who forced him wide. This argument continued to create waves in Mexico when McLaren requested the right to review this penalty, a request that was ultimately denied by the FIA. In light of these ongoing disputes, Horner has suggested that the Circuit of the Americas should consider installing gravel at the exit of Turn 12 to eliminate similar issues in the future. He remarked, "I think these matters are discussed thoroughly among the team managers and drivers, and we have established guidelines that are quite clear. In some ways, they make cricket look straightforward." Horner continued, "The essence of what transpired last weekend revolves around the fact that it is only natural for two drivers to push each other to the limit, but overtaking off the racing surface is not allowed." He believes that a straightforward solution would be to take a cue from the Austrian Grand Prix experience. By introducing gravel at the corner's exits, drivers would naturally avoid those areas. He acknowledged that financial considerations and restrictions could complicate this, but emphasized that having a deterrent at the exit of a corner, such as at Turn 12 in Austin, would significantly reduce wide-running incidents. He stated, "If drivers know that crossing the curb could severely slow them down or even risk damaging their car, they are less likely to run wide." As it stands, Red Bull and McLaren are both positioned at the front of the grid heading into the Mexican Grand Prix, leading the standings in both championships. Currently, Verstappen has a strong lead in the Drivers' Championship with a 57-point advantage over Norris. Meanwhile, in the Constructors' Championship, McLaren holds a notable 40-point lead over Red Bull. Direct but respectful conversations reportedly took place between Max Verstappen and Lando Norris during their time in Mexico as they discussed the guidelines for Formula One racing. This dialogue highlights the ongoing concerns regarding the rules that govern wheel-to-wheel racing in the sport. The regulations set forth by the FIA regarding direct racing encounters were scrutinized intensively following the intense battles between the two title contenders, Verstappen and Norris, during the recent United States Grand Prix. These thrilling exchanges included one critical moment at Turn 1, where Verstappen made a bold move to dive down the inside as both drivers found themselves off the racing line. A second significant incident unfolded at Turn 12 when Norris attempted to pass Verstappen around the outside, resulting in both drivers failing to complete the corner successfully. Consequently, Norris was handed a 5-second penalty for this altercation, as it was determined that he had exited the track and thereby gained an advantage by rejoining ahead of Verstappen. This penalty ultimately dropped him to 4th place, while Verstappen capitalized on the situation, increasing his lead in the Drivers' Championship to a solid 57 points. The tactics employed by Verstappen in the USGP sparked considerable debate among the drivers during the weekend of the Mexican Grand Prix. According to a report by Craig Slater from Sky Sports News, the drivers' meeting proved to be quite lively as discussions about the recent racing incidents took center stage. In light of what transpired in Austin, the FIA is preparing to present revised wording for the racing regulations to the drivers. Slater reported that the atmosphere at the drivers' meeting in Mexico City was charged, with direct conversations occurring between Norris and Verstappen regarding the topics of defending and overtaking. Both drivers, however, were noted to have maintained a calm and respectful demeanor throughout their dialogue. The primary focus of the meeting was how to improve the rules that govern on-track engagements. There was a general consensus among the drivers that standards need to be elevated, and they emphasized that the ongoing evaluation of the rules must be intensified. The meeting began with the drivers seeking clarity from the FIA about the decision-making process employed by the stewards when handling incidents, such as the clash between Verstappen and Norris. The drivers expressed their desire to comprehend how stewards arrive at their conclusions during these crucial moments. During the explanation, the FIA acknowledged that they would create some new wording for the current racing guidelines and present it to the drivers for their assessment and feedback. This admission led some attendees to see it as a recognition of shortcomings in the existing guidelines, suggesting that they may have inadvertently allowed for some loopholes to be exploited. Nonetheless, the majority viewed this initiative as a positive step. demonstrating that the FIA is willing to engage in critical self-reflection and implement necessary changes. Another topic that emerged during the discussions was whether stewards are fully utilizing all available rules in situations like the Norris and Verstappen incident. Some drivers pointed out that the existing rule concerning forcing another driver off the track could indeed apply in such scenarios. They argued that even under the current regulations, pushing another competitor off the track should not be acceptable behavior. This indicates a clear distinction must be made between legitimately defending one's position and intentionally driving another driver wide at a corner. Ultimately, there is a shared understanding among the drivers and the FIA that while the rules may never be entirely flawless, there is a strong desire to refine the wording of the regulations and to clearly delineate the guidelines. The FIA has stated that these guidelines have been developed at the request of the drivers themselves and crafted through collaboration with the governing body, culminating in approval by the Grand Prix Drivers Association. They express a commitment to continually evolve these regulations, noting that they have undergone several amendments in recent seasons. Notably, McLaren had lodged an appeal against the steward's decision to impose a 5-second penalty on Norris, but their request for review was ultimately denied by the FIA. Franco Colapinto is leaving his F1 future in the capable hands of his management team, amidst rumors he could join VCARB next season. Colapinto has been linked to Red Bull's junior team for next season in a game of musical chairs that would see the Williams driver partner Yuki Tsunoda at VCARB, Liam Lawson take the Red Bull seat alongside Max Verstappen, and Sergio Perez potentially leave Formula One. Colapinto was promoted to a Williams seat at the Italian Grand Prix, called up by team boss James Vowles to replace the beleaguered Logan Sargent after he was dropped. Contesting 4 races, the 21-year-old has already bagged 2 top 10 results to bring his points tally to 5. That's more in those 4 starts than Sargent managed in his 36 as he scored a solitary point. Red Bull Motorsport advisor Helmut Marko is impressed with what he's seen of the Argentinian. "We see it with Colapinto," he told Motorsport Total, "as a relatively inexperienced and not very successful guy in the junior series, although it must be said that he never had the top teams, but what an incredible performance he is having now. I think he has a long-term contract with Williams. He will definitely be someone in the future. What he showed was very, very good." That added fuel to speculation that Colapinto could be the answer to Red Bull's driver dilemma. Nothing, though, is in his hands. He needs Lawson to impress the Red Bull bosses enough that they sit down with Perez to discuss his exit, and then he needs Williams and Red Bull to agree on a deal that would allow him to leave the Grove team, as Red Bull are unlikely to leave a back door open for him to return to Williams in a year or 3. Audi also remain an option as they've yet to sign their second driver, although that's said to be a fight between Valtteri Bottas and Mick Schumacher. But while Colapinto would like to remain on the grid next season, the driver accepts he may have to wait a year or 2 to secure a full-time race seat, especially as Williams have their drivers locked in until the end of 2026. Asked by Martin Brundle if teams were talking to him, he told the Sky pundit, "I'm not really into it. Of course, my managers are doing an amazing job and I really trust them. But my job is driving a car quick enough and turn the wheel, and their job is to find me a seat. So they are doing a great job on that. I'm not really focused on what's happening. I don't want to put too much energy on it. I know that there is no seats left at the moment, and there is no space for me to go. But look, I'm driving to show that I deserve a seat in Formula One, and that I deserve my place here, that I came to stay and not to be only a couple of races. So, I hope to be in that impression. I'm sure I'm going to be back in the future, 26, 27. I'm sure I'm going to be back. So I'm going to work hard for that. Of course, still a couple of races left this year to show what I can do. So that's good news. But look, if you told me 2 months ago I would be here, I wouldn't believe you. I'm just enjoying this opportunity. The chance that William gave me is something from another planet. I'm just giving my all to give the team what they deserve." That's it for this video. I'll see you around.